They warned Faith about him. They said his name like it carried trouble, like a storm gathering on the horizon. They said David was not the kind of man a good woman should love. But nobody warned her about what her heart would feel the first night she saw him, and how that one moment would change everything. It was raining, a heavy, relentless downpour outside the hospital where Faith worked as a nurse. She was tired. Her feet hurt. Her mind was a chaotic tangle of the day's events. And that was when she noticed him, a man standing by the gate, still, silent, watching the emergency ward like he was waiting for fate itself to make a decision. She almost walked right past him. Almost, but something made her stop, some invisible thread pulling her toward him. She asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, but his eyes told a completely different story, a story of worrying and deep-seated pain. He was waiting for someone, he said, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that simple answer was enough. From that night on, David began to appear in her life like a quiet, comforting habit. Sometimes he would bring food for the patients who had no visitors. Other times, he would just sit in the waiting area, watching the world pass by in a comfortable silence. He spoke very little, but when he smiled, it was a rare and precious thing, something that felt earned. Faith learned that David never talked about his past, and so she learned not to ask. Love doesn't always need answers. Sometimes it just needs understanding, a quiet space to grow. And slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening, love found its way into her heart. Then the warnings came, whispered in the hospital corridors and over cups of coffee. They told her to be careful. They said David had a past, one tied to violence, to crime, to a danger she couldn't possibly comprehend. But Faith had seen his kindness when no one was watching. She had seen the gentle way he treated the lonely and the lost. And she chose to believe that people could change, that the person he was now was the person who truly mattered. There was a time, before fear learned both their names, when Faith and David managed to forget the world outside. A time when their love felt simple, honest, and completely safe. They laughed more back then. They touched more freely. They held on to every single moment as if they were afraid time itself might steal them away. It was a fragile, beautiful bubble they had built for themselves. One quiet night, with rain tapping softly against the windows, Faith and David lay together in the hush of a dimly lit room. There was no rush, no fear, just the warmth of their bodies and the sound of their shared breath. Love found them there, not in a loud or desperate way, but in a tender, undeniable reality. As the world faded away, they held each other like a promise, a silent vow against the darkness. Afterward, David was quiet to quiet. Faith felt the weight settling back onto his chest before she even saw it in his eyes. He traced idle patterns on her arm, his voice barely louder than the falling rain. He told her there were things about him she didn't know, things he had tried so hard to bury. For the very first time, she saw fear in him. He was afraid that if she saw him fully, saw the man he used to be, she would leave. He started to speak, the words of his past hovering on his lips, years of silence begging to be released. Faith listened, her heart open, ready to accept whatever he had to say, and then a knock. Sharp, urgent. The moment shattered into a million pieces. David froze. Faith sat up, her heart pounding. Before any questions could be formed, before any truths could finally escape, sirens began to scream in the distance, growing closer and closer. And just like that, their fragile bubble popped. Love stepped aside to make room for fear. This was the last peaceful moment they would ever share before everything changed forever. The night that everything changed arrived without mercy. Red and blue lights flooded the street, painting the walls of her apartment in frantic, strobing colors. People shouted, doors slammed, and there was David, on his knees on the wet pavement, hands behind his back, surrounded by police. Faith's world tilted, her heart feeling like it had stopped beating altogether. The man she loved, the gentle, quiet man she knew was being taken away. The truth finally came out, piece by painful piece. David had once been trapped in a life he never chose, a life of crime he fought desperately to escape. He had almost made it out. He had almost been free. What happens when the past you tried to escape finally catches up? And can love truly survive a truth this devastating? Watch out for part 2 to find out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.